If your child or someone you love or care about is being harassed online, I need you to listen to this video before it's too late. A 14-year-old boy right around Christmas time was being targeted online, and he unfortunately committed suicide. Criminal investigation is being opened, but here's what I need you to know about that. In Florida, there's a powerful law that could intervene in these circumstances where people are being harassed online. I think it's probably unlikely that someone is being harassed online and out of the blue, the extreme case of suicide or self-harm happens. I think that in many cases, family members, loved ones, friends, other peer groups, social members, school administrators, employees are aware that someone is going through cyberstalking, online harassment, and they're just unclear about what to do about it. So if you know anyone that's suffering any kind of online harm or any kind of attacks, pay attention to this, and let me give you the important tool in your toolbox that you got to implement. Florida statute 784048 defines cyberstalking as a course of conduct to communicate directly or indirectly words, images, or language through electronic communication directed at a specific person that causes emotional distress and that serves no legitimate purpose. So again, think about each of those elements there. It is a course of conduct communicating at people that causes distress that serves no legitimate purpose. If you're a parent, you may have heard about this. If you got a kid going through this or you're hearing about it in school, you know what this is. This is not the same sort of schoolyard taunts that we might have dealt with as kids. This is a more persistent form of conduct that, again, typically people know is occurring and don't really know how to put an end to it. But I can promise you this. There is a way to put an end to all of this, and that is in the injunction process that Florida law gives us. I'm going to drop the link in here to a couple of websites that outline this, but the purpose of this video is to explain to people, give you the resources to understand how to deploy and implement this. The petition is really simple. It's kind of modeled after the domestic violence injunction. Give the legislature, law enforcement a lot of credit for stepping up when we realized that this problem of cyber stalking needed to be addressed. And what happens is every single courthouse in this state has a room with dedicated servants in there. Some are volunteers, some are employees, but these are experienced practitioners and professionals. And you walk in there, and they've got the form right there, and they help you fill out a form. And you could go in there first and grab the form, see what the questions that are asked are. I'll, again, drop the link in here so that you can read through what those elements are. And then as a parent, as an administrator, as a loved one, I encourage you to compare what the legal standard is and the questions that are asked with the statements that you're looking at, right? So parents, we got a duty, an absolute obligation to monitor that kid's cell phone, all communication. I'm kind of taking the Australia route where there's zero online stuff. That's what should be happening. But, you know, if your kid is online, there's an absolute duty and obligation to monitor this stuff all the time, 24/7. And when you find that your kid is becoming the target of online harassment, you got to take steps immediately, right? So it's not always nuclear. It's not always running down and filing a cyberstalking injunction. But there are enough cases out there of kids that are finding themselves in such a desperate circumstance that they engage in self-harm. And I just believe that if parents were monitoring this communication a lot more diligently, maybe we don't get to that level. But the bottom line is this, mom, dad, loved one, coworker, whatever, you start reading this communication and you compare it next to the definition for cyberstalking. And when you've crossed that threshold and you clicked it in your mind that you think, hey, there may be the basis for cyberstalking injunction, go down to the courthouse and file it. Throughout my career, I've got this concept that if there's ever a question, whether it's exploitation or spousal abuse or, abuse of any kind, get those facts when they're based on good faith in front of a judge and let the judge decide. That way, if anything happens, your conscience is cleared. You put it in the hands of a professional. But the bottom line is this. this is a tool that has got to be implemented. In this call to action, want to see a world where no longer are news stories talking about self-harm of a kid, suicide or depression or any of these other long-term consequences, emotional, psychiatric, and otherwise, because a kid was suffering. I don't want to see news stories about that anymore. What I want to see is news stories about how a parent, an administrator, a coworker recognized cyberstalking and online harassment, went to court, and got that injunction. I promise you judges are taking this really seriously right now. And I promise you that, if your kid is the target of this, you as the parent have a duty and now have a tool to immediately go in and affect change, do something about it. And I promise you that, if you're in this school environment and your kid is being targeted, it's being harassed, I know one of the impulses is, hey, I don't want to make it worse, and there's certainly elements of that we got to be sensitive to. But we all know when it's just crossed the line and when the kids, the mob, the bullies are not going to stop and they're not going to back off. And our job as parents, as administrators, as advocates, is to take those examples and say, we're going to stand up and do something. We're going to get a cyberstalking injunction against this ringleader, against these kids that are doing that. And I promise you, once the law's involved, once judges are involved, the bullying, the harassment is going to stop. Because once that cyberstalking injunction is issued, this is bringing in parents. This is bringing in all the other asset groups of the cyberstalking perpetrators. And as a judge, I'd be hauling in parents of every one of these. I'd be demanding that everyone that's part of the online mob be identified and drag them all into my courtroom. And I'm thinking about this sort of school environment cyberstalking. But I can envision circumstances where, these poor kids that are being targeted by cyberstalking, judges demanding that the mob be brought into her courtroom and let themselves be subjected to the very real consequences of the law for their online behavior. So that's the call to action here. If you're a school administrator, parent, victim of cyberstalking, adult, minor, whatever, understand what cyberstalking is. Understand the injunction process and how you can get it. If you have examples of this, I'd love to hear it because, again, I want to hear about these things before self-harm has occurred. Stop cyberstalking. You can do it. The tools exist.